In terms of synastry, something to avoid if the other person is not as developed or willing to work on themselves within the relationship, because within synastry, it always depends how evolved are the two people and how much are the two people willing to work on themselves within the relationship. If you are involved with someone who is not going to take accountability for their own shadow behavior in that particular situation, these particular placements could involve a lot of projecting onto you. So it would be any sort of Plutonian aspects, especially when it comes to the personal planets, and especially if you are the Pluto person who is triggering the other individual. A lot of the time with the generational placement, you behave in ways unconsciously that are going to trigger the other person, because Plutonian relationships are relationships that are the potential for growth. Essentially, they're going to bring to the surface anything that is at the base of the spine. That's what the sexual energy is doing. These things are going to be coming to the surface for you to clear, for you to heal, and for you to integrate. If you're involved with someone who is not willing to look at themselves, well, you're going to be the scapegoat in this particular situation. So always check and see what's going on with the other person. Are they willing to work on themselves? And do they even have this type of awareness? Self-awareness is really what that is. Any sort of 8th house synastry, so your placement's going into the other person's 8th house, especially if you have a combination of Pluto going on in terms of the synastry, Neptune, and even if there is, let's say, a Chiron moon wound, let's say for the other person if they're into feminine, or if the other person is into masculines and there's a Chiron Saturn wound, well, in that particular case, this is going to be the mother and the father wound. So if you see these combinations in terms of synastry and the other person is not developed, I personally would recommend not getting involved with this particular individual, or at least testing them early on to see how do they react in certain situations. If they're not willing to work on themselves and they're going to project on you, this is just a recipe for disaster, because Pluto is going to bring shadows to the surface. Neptune is going to bring a lot of this idealizing energy, but also self-deception. So again, if they are not evolved, they're going to project onto you. They're going to think you're deceiving them, even though it's self-deception. So it's a lot of putting the other person on a pedestal, and then either the Chiron moon wound or the Chiron Saturn wound, depending on the person and depending on the nature of the relationship, who is who and what's going on with the energies within. If you have all these combinations going on, this is basically a recipe for potential disaster if the other person isn't willing to work on themselves, or great healing. So it depends.